All right, great. So let's move to our interactive performance reporting. All right. So just as in way of an outline or explanation, we're going to go we're going to look at interactive reporting, the menu-driven environment for that, where you summarize by stop or segment or pattern, or by route, or you can also input a shapefile and summarize regionally if you want to. You do all that by time period, TBS time period, by ridership, whether it's total boardings, direct boardings, transfer boardings, observed ridership, observed alightings. So all of those are summarizable. That's the word. And you have map rendering to go along with it, which is really cool to have both the report and a rendering of your ridership along with it. You have a route headway summary, a route service report, and a route socioeconomic report. We'll cover all of those. Okay, so TBEST has an interactive report performance reporting that you can do at multiple levels of your system. So you can go to the very smallest level, which would be individual stops, and it could be one stop, it could be multiple stops. Any stop selection that you would make in TBEST, you can do a ridership report for it. And that would be both from an estimated standpoint, and if you have the APC data in from an observed ridership standpoint. So that goes for at the next level segment, and then up to the pattern, and then to the route, and then regional or jurisdictional analysis is available as well. All these are interactive relative to selections that you would make in the interface. That could be a map selection, it could be a list selection, it could be a query that you would perform to select these routes or transit features. So all of that kind of works together in terms of this interactive reporting, so that you can define what you want to report on through all those different types, and then run the report and also get a map result for it as well. And you can do this by time period. So if you want to see results for weekday or Saturday or Sunday, or any of your peak periods, you can do that as well. All right, so this is the general interface for your performance reporting, where you have the summarize by option, which would be for where you select stop, segments, pattern, route, regional analysis, the basic reports. And those will be off of either all of the stops in the system or just the selected ones, or segments or routes or patterns. And you also have the time period selection. You have the ridership type, which is either estimated or observed. The map rendering would be total boardings, transfer boardings, direct boardings, and then ridership as a segment bandwidth. And you can also have stop level reporting as well. And you can summarize by selected stops only, all stops. You can group by patterns. You can group by direction, by route name, and stop name. So the grouping by stop name is important, because what that gives you is ridership for a particular stop in total, right? Regardless of route, it's going to say this stop at this time of day has a total ridership of X. And you might have 4 routes that serve that stop, and this is the total ridership on that stop. So that's an important summary item, and I think a lot of people might like that, is to do that kind of grouping with their data. Okay, so this is the interactive map rendering of stop ridership results. So what you have in the map depiction is the individual stop ridership. So the darker colors are and larger circles show more ridership. Smaller, lighter circles are lower ridership. So basically, you can see the clusters of ridership within your system. pretty easily see that with this particular estimation. This is the estimated ridership. And what you get along with this is a report that has the stop, the pattern number for the stop and the stop ID, and then the direct boardings and transfer boardings and total boardings columns, so that you have a total boardings for every stop. Now, these are stops per pattern, right? So this isn't the grouped stops where it's just stop ID and then total ridership. This is telling you per pattern, route pattern, what your ridership is by time of day. In this case, it's a weekday summary, but you could also do AM peak or off peak or PM peak or night or Saturday or Sunday. When you generate the map, you can see that you have in the map control, you have a new layer that gets added for total boardings. And it shows you the distribution of the symbols, the values and the symbols, so that you can say, well, yes, okay, from 107 to 255 are my large blue circles in the map, right? So you have a legend here to show you how T-Best is breaking up your data to show it to you. And of course, you can change that. So even though T-Best is showing this to you, you have the ability to change that within T-Best, but you can also use the export to ArcGIS to actually export this data out, and then you can change it directly in ArcMap, because what happens when you export, it's going to ask you, you want to open this in ArcMap. And when you do that, the data will appear as it is in T-Best. So all of the routes, everything, the estimation results will show up just as they do in T-Best. So then you can change them in ArcMap and then save that off as a MXD, or in the future would be ArcGIS Pro related. So it's a great tool for getting data out of T-Best and starting to use it in another context or part of your TDP or COA. Okay, and we have the same kind of functionality for observed ridership. So this is when you have loaded up your APC data into T-Best through the GTFS, that additional file, the stop ridership.txt, that is the T-Best file that you can bring in your stop level ridership data by time of day and bring that in and start to use that here and show it. So, so this is one of those reports that takes into account that APC data, and it allows you to summarize it at every level, just like you would an estimation, meaning at the segment level or the pattern level or at the route level or regionally. So this is the report that comes out of T-Best and showing total boardings, total lightings, route miles, and all of your performance metrics that go along with your observed ridership. So this is the actual observed ridership as opposed to what T-Best estimates, which is an estimate that's validated, but it's still not the actual observed stop level data. So this is definitely, whenever you're looking at your base conditions, this is very accurate and a great way to summarize your information. And again, all of this is exportable to both Excel and to ArcGIS. And so if you want to push this data out into an external data set that you can work with within ArcMap or other tool sets, you can do that. So the other type of map rendering that we have with this interactive reporting is segment bandwidth. So this is an example of the Gatorville system, and rather than showing the stop level ridership with the symbols graduated by size and by color, we're graduating the segments, that assigning the ridership to the segments and showing bandwidths, meaning the size of the actual route alignment is relative to how many boardings are on it by time of day, right? So this is a rendering of the segments with weekday ridership, observed ridership from what we brought in from the APC data. And again, this is exportable to ArcGIS. And also exportable out to Excel, just like our scenario comparison, same type of format. Export. Okay, so that was our performance reporting. Now we want to look at our service reporting or route headway report. So this is a little bit of a different type of report in that it's interactive with the map. So, and you'll see how that works in just a minute, but it gives you the headway for each of the T-best time periods plus the aggregate weekday headway. And then it displays that in a report, but it also displays all of those headways in the map as bandwidth. So kind of similar to what we just saw with the ridership, except we show it as headway. And so, and you can do that by time period. You can export the report to Excel and map to ArcGIS. And so what this brings you is the ability to fulfill some TDP requirements for your service distribution. And so this is the route headway report, or it's highlighted by time period. So I mentioned that it's interactive. And so whenever you select a column header, it will change the map below, right? So if I select weekday, then it will change the map to just show weekday headways as opposed to the other time periods. So here Saturday is selected, so you can see the difference between here's weekday and here's Saturday. And all we did was just change our headers, right? We highlighted the Saturday column and it changed the map to reflect that. All right, so the headway report, it's a great example for a COA where you're looking at existing versus proposed. And this is an example from, where are we at here?
Dallas.
Dallas, okay. I was going to say, this doesn't look like Florida. But it really gives you an easy way to generate a map like this, where you're saying, here is my existing system, here is my proposed system in terms of service levels, and a great way to easily put that into a map to show that difference. Okay, some additional interactive reporting is the route service report. And this is what we actually went through yesterday, so I won't go into this in too much detail, but just to let you know that it is here. And what this is, and what's interesting about this one is that it doesn't require any ridership estimation whatsoever. It doesn't really require anything other than importing the GTFS into TBEST. So by default, without doing anything else in TBEST, if you just import a GTFS, then you can easily run this report without doing anything else, right? So what I would say is this is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of being able to view your service information from, the perspective of weekday, Saturday, Sunday, and your peak periods, and summarizing it. So, so just keep that in mind, that this will always work. It won't ask you for a model run. It won't ask you for socioeconomic growth rates. It won't ask you for anything. It will always work. So that's really why this report is in there, because it just makes it so much easier to just run our service report without doing all the other things like running models, etc. So, so just keep that in mind when you're running this report. All right, so this is one that we haven't talked about yet, our route socioeconomic reporting. And so this is also interactive, where you would select routes in the routes panel, and that route selection can be as anything else. It can be from the map, it can be directly from the panel. And we're going to go over the query tool, or it can be from the query tool. So whatever selection you've made, or it could be intersected with mobility areas, which is a whole other topic we're going to cover today as well. So you define what the selection is, and then TBEST will summarize that information in a route level socioeconomic report. And you would define that based on a service period. So the option here is to say, well, I want to see all service period, meaning no matter when this route is in service, I don't really care. I just want to see the profiles for all of my routes. But you can also filter it to just say, well, I just want to see Sunday routes or Saturday routes or weekday routes. So you're able to filter the routes that are, in service or not in service based on weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can also specify the walk access distance. By default, this will be your Title VI policy. So whatever you've entered in your Title VI policy, your operations settings that we did yesterday for the transit system, will be default populated into this dialog when you begin to run this report. And so that's where that shows up. And you can do walk access from stops, which is the default, or from the segments. So generally we do it from the stops, but certainly if you don't, if you want to do it specifically from the route pattern segments, then you can do that as well. And you do have several profiles here that you can get to. So this is the default profile that you're seeing, which is kind of a mix of data. In the first section, you have population data. In the second section, you have household data. And in the third section, you have employment data. And then you have a final section, which is your walk area in square miles. So what's great about this report too, you can see this little map button beside each one of these rows. If you click that button, it will open a map of your Route 3 in this case in the market analysis tool, so you can actually dive into some of the data relative to Route 3. You can also click at the totals level, and that will show you the distribution for all the routes that you have selected in the market analysis. So this is a great little interactive tool. You can show other profiles as well: household profile, employment, Title VI, race and ethnicity, auto ownership, income levels, education, population age, language, and household income. So all of these are exportable to Excel as well. So you can push them out to Excel. One other item here that has is this show demographic counts. So right now, when you have shares of population, such as percent minority, percent Hispanic, LEP, over 65, under 18, it gives that value as a percent. So, and that's a percent of the total population in this case. Now, if you change this to show demographic counts, it will actually give you the count data instead of the percentages. So that's a whole different look at it. And all you have to do is check that off and it will show it to you. So that's something you can also consider here to be, I've seen several reports where it shows, here's the count data, here's the percent as well. So this gives you both as well. There are, you basically two reports. One is counts and one is percentages. Okay, so let's go through some exercises. Any questions right now, we'll take them, but otherwise we'll go through the exercises. What time is it? 9:37. So we'll go through these exercises and then we'll take a break. Okay. So I'm starting at 7.2, interactive reporting exercise, step 1, the interactive report generation for observed ridership. All right. So step 1 is not already open. Open the June 2021 scenario in the TBES scenario network editor. So the reason that we're opening the June 2021 scenario is because that is the only scenario that has valid observed ridership. Because when we imported it and validated it, it had the observed ridership that came in from the June 2021 network, and we didn't alter that network at all. We just brought it then directly from the GTFS. Therefore, it matches the ridership that came in with the GTFS. And so, and we validated with it, right? So basically what we should see here is that the stop ridership status in here is that this scenario contains valid stop level ridership. All right, so if we compare that to some of our others, stop status, it says this scenario does not contain stop level ridership. This scenario does not contain it. So basically, our validated model is the only one that we really trust to have the right observed ridership data that came in from the GTFS because we validated it. So when we're talking about validation, it kind of includes that stop level ridership that you bring in from the GTFS if you bring it in. It's not required that you do, but if you bring it in, it is part of the validation as well. All right, so from there, I want to open it, so I'm just going to double click on it. All right. So from the reports drop-down menu on the TBES main toolbar, select the route performance menu option. So that is right here, the route performance menu option. Just so you know too, I think you can get to that from the selection over here. So if you select routes over here, you can right click and go to route performance reporting and it takes you to the same place. This, when you do it from here, it will default to selected routes only. When you do it from here, it will default to all routes. So just so you know, that's kind of the difference. So let's show for all routes. And what we want to see is observed ridership. So we'll switch from estimated to observed in our ridership type. We're going to leave the summarized by at routes. We're going to leave the time period as weekday. And we're going to switch the map rendering to segment bandwidth for boardings. And we're going to summarize by all routes with no grouping. So if you do it with no grouping, what happens is it will show by direction. So it will say Route 1 eastbound and Route 1 westbound, and group it that way. If you say you want to group by route name, then it will group and just show your route totals, right? So that's really what we want in this case, is the group by route name. And so we'll hit apply. Okay. So what you can see here is that we have two outputs from this report. One is the report itself, which shows the total boardings and total lightings for each route. And it shows the performance in terms of route miles, trips, service hours, and then boardings per service mile, boardings per service hour, boardings per service trip, and our average boardings per stop visit. So these are all kind of key indicators that you would use in a TDP or a COA that would kind of summarize your route service and also its performance. So this in and of itself is a really good report to have, and especially for your observed ridership that's derived from your APC data that you can use for multiple types of planning processes. At the bottom, you see that there's a total, and what you see is that for RTS, the data that we received from them was, I don't know, you'll probably know as well as I do that the APC data tends not to be, entirely accurate all the time. And it's somewhat hard to aggregate and push into certain totals. So that's kind of what's going on here. So I apologize for the difference in the lightings versus boardings, but really has to do a little more with the source of the data. But the idea is that it is in here and can be utilized here. All right, so the other item is the map. And so we have our map with a rendering of total boardings by segment. So you can see where the heavily trafficked in terms of ridership areas are and where the lower ridership is, which kind of makes sense. This is the core area of Gainesville. So this is the Butler Plaza Transit Center. This is downtown. This is University of Florida. So you have some core areas that are being served and with a lot of service, and then some other areas that aren't getting as much service and kind of lower route ridership. So basically that's what we're looking at in terms of the distribution. Now here's where it gets kind of fun, is that if you can export the map data. So this button on the top, export on the map toolbar, where you have export map data, you can click that button and it will ask you how you want to export the data. By default, it will say file geodatabase. You can switch that to shapefiles or KMZ. We're going to do a file geodatabase. And we're just going to create another folder in our TBES Transit Systems Gatorville data. And remember, you might be in Gatorville too, so your directory might be a little bit different. So I'm going to create a new folder in here, and this will be data exports. So I know the data I'm exporting from TBES. And I'm just going to call this the It says June 2021 Headway, but really that's not what this is. This is the, oh, sorry, this is the June 2021 ridership. Sorry about that. So instead of Headway, it should be kind of our ridership. And hit save on that. So we'll do the exports. They don't ask you if you want to open an ArcMap, and I'm going to say yes. Okay. So what we have is the same map that we had in TBES now exists here in ArcGIS, which is great. So we can look at our observed results. We can open the attribute table for it, and we can see some information about the route name, the route description, the total boardings and total alightings. And this is, I think, at the route pattern level. So basically, this is for every segment in the system. It's going to total the total boardings and total alightings on that segment. All right, so that's kind of cool to have this available to you. You can obviously change whatever you want to inside of ArcMap. And this will be something where you can, obviously save this information if you want to, and hit apply, show different things, however you want to change it is fine, to inside of ArcMap, and then save this MXD. I would say save as, because you probably want to save it in a location where you can get to it easily. I wouldn't just save because you don't necessarily know where it's at, or it's not really in a location you know where it is. So I would do a save as here and save it probably in our CBEST, and we can do our transit system and Gatorville and data. And we can make that folder here or just put it in our data exports. Actually, sorry, it put it right there in data exports by default. So my bad. It just puts it right there. So we can save it, and it would be in that same folder as the data. All right, so let's close that. And we're going to close the report and watch what happens, because as soon as I close the report, all the data goes away that was in there for the ridership data, and it goes back to the map as normal. So it basically puts it into a display mode for reporting. And then once you close the report, then it goes back to kind of editing and analysis mode, right? So it uses the map for reporting and then backs out of it once you close the report. Okay, so let's try some other reporting for, we can do a stop ridership boardings map instead of a segment bandwidth, and maybe we can do it for AM peak, and we can do it for the selected routes only. So we have 5 through 12 selected, and we can hit the apply button. So we get an AM peak. Let's change this up. So we get an AM peak report for routes 5 through 12 that gives the total boardings and total alightings for AM peak and all of their performance metrics and service levels for AM peak, and also gives a map of just the stops that are on those particular routes. So it filters the to the selection both in the report and in the map. And again, all this data is exportable as well. And we can use our identify here as well. This would be our identify features for the map. And if we click that, and then we click on any of these stops, then we can see that they're loaded with the total boardings and total alightings. They have their route name, the description, the direction, route type and mode and pattern that they're on as well. Okay, great. So whenever we close this, the data again will go away, and it goes back to just regular edit mode and analysis mode in TBES. So let's do a couple other reports. Let's do the stop level reporting. And we want to do all stops, and we want to group by stop name. And so basically this is going to create a report where it will give you, for every stop that's in the system, the stop name, and then the total ridership for that stop, regardless of the the routes that serve it. So it's just a total of all ridership, regardless of route on a particular stop and a levy. So, and it also does that for the map data. So instead of having multiple stops that exist under a mouse click, you just have one stop and it has all of your ridership in it. So this is a little cleaner in terms of how it shows the ridership. And so it's kind of nice to have this as well as the other formulation for this where it's showing on a pattern basis. This is a roll up of the data to the stop level. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Let's see. All right, so we've been reporting on observed ridership, but we can also report on estimated ridership. And that's pretty easy to do. We will just close our scenario report. It will take everything away. And instead of showing ridership type as observed, we can just switch that to estimated. And it's asking us to do the fall 2021. So we'll switch our scenario. So we'll close the June 2021 scenario and we'll open fall 2021. So we'll just double click on fall 2021. Okay. So again, we'll go to route performance. And go to estimated routes for the weekday, and we'll do segment bandwidth again. Now you notice that when we choose estimated as the ridership type, our lists change for our map rendering, where we get total boardings, direct boardings, transfer boardings, and segment bandwidth boardings. Now the total direct and transfer at the stop level. So if you wanted to create a map that just has transfer boardings that TBES projects, then you can do that. You can create a map that is just transfer boardings at the stop level. And what's great about this too is that something you could do when you export this data, because when you export it, it will have in the estimated world, it will have direct and transfer in total. If you do in the observed, it will have boardings and alightings. So in ArcMap, you can make different symbols off of that, meaning you can do kind of a pie chart at every stop and split between, direct and transfer, or, total boardings and alightings, right? So you can see the splits between them at the whatever you select. So if you select a route and you say, I want to know, stop ridership, let's say total boardings for weekday, and we'll show estimated and selected routes only. So let's see, we want to do this for route, let's try route 20. So let's do this for our selected routes only and just route 20. So here is the ridership data along just route 20. And this is direct and transfer and total boardings. And if we export this data, exports, and this is route 20. Sorry, I'm going off a little off script here, and so just kind of bear with me. I'm showing you a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, but I'm trying to stay within the context of this reporting. So here you have the total boardings in its own file. The estimation results is in its own feature class. And if we open the attribute table for it, we can see that we have the columns for total boardings, transfer boardings, direct boardings, and arrivals. So what we might want to see here is the splits between total boardings and transfer boardings, or I'm sorry, transfer and direct boardings. So I'm pretty sure that we can set the properties on this to show the charts of pi for transfer and direct. And then if you wanted to do, I think you can do a graduated symbol size for total boarding. So let's see what happens here. No, didn't want that. Let's go back to our charts. So here's the chart. So, and you have to play with prevent the chart overlap and the size. You can take way down here because you don't want it to be that big, and hit apply. And then maybe this looks a little better. And then we can come out with that and zoom in. So you could do that kind of analysis and kind of route level totaling in ArcGIS. So this might be something you can do for observed ridership to show boardings and alightings. And then, you know, it's kind of a nice way of doing that. So, so you have that kind of power to pull the data out of TBES through the interactive recording, put it into ArcGIS or another environment to do some additional mapping and summarization. Okay, I'm going to close ArcMap. Okay, so I'm going to go to step 3 in 7.2 interactive reporting. And I'm going to close the reports that I have open right now. I'm going to clear all my selections, including my route selection. So really, I just want a clean slate here. So, so I've done that. I clicked the clear route selection button on the routes toolbar. And now I want to go over to the reports menu dropdown, and I want to select the route headway summary. So this is for fall 2021. And so what you see here is a listing of routes and their headways for the weekday. So by default, the map will show weekday, and the weekday column here will be highlighted in the report. So, but you can see that AM peak, off peak, PM peak night, Saturday and Sunday are all here as well. And they're listing the directional headway for each route. So route 1 and 2, all the way down to route 800 here. Each one is showing a headway. So in order to change it, what we would do is click the header. So if I want to see the AM peak headway, I click the AM peak header. If I want to see off peak, it will change the map. PM peak will change the map. Night will change the map. You can see that, oh, started to look a little bit different. Your peak periods are, you know, pretty heavily trafficked. You go to Saturday, then you have a very different map, and then Sunday also different. So, so this is a really easy way to show your service levels on your network. And if we go back to weekday, we can show it as well. So what's great about this is the same process. You can do this export map data, and we'll go to data exports, and we'll call this file geodatabase the June 2021 headway. And yes, we want to open it in ArcMap. Matt, how are we doing? Any questions from?
None so far, but anyone feel free to speak up now.
That's fine. So what you can see here is that in the ArcMap layer, you have weekday 1 to 10 minute headways, 11 to 20, 21 to 35, 36 to 65, and then greater than 65 is the breakout of headways shown in this map. Of course, you can change that inside of ArcMap, and you can look at the attribute table here. And what we should have is actually all of the time periods summarized here as well. So if you're looking for a data set that has at the route level, has your weekday, AM peak, off peak, PM peak, night, Saturday and Sunday headways all in one data set, this is a really easy way to get that into ArcGIS world. Okay, and then you can change this map based on any of these columns or use the data in any way you wish. But this is a great way to fulfill your TDP requirement for your route service levels and produce that map for it. And again, we just close the report and it clears out the data and we're back to where we were before. Okay, so the next item is the route socioeconomic reporting. So this is something where you can do all routes, you can do a subset of routes, and it's based on the selection that you would make in the map or in the list. So if I wanted to do a map selection and say, well, I just want the routes that access the airport, right? That's really all I care about. You can just drag a box over the airport and that selects all of the routes which access the airport. So that's route 25 and 26. You could select, the Butler Plaza routes as well. So Butler Plaza is right here. And those are all the routes that access Butler Plaza, right? So that's also kind of handy to know. And so here's my list. So what I want to do is take this selection. I can just right click on the list of routes and do route socioeconomic reporting. And that will bring up my route socioeconomic report dialog. And we showed this in the slide, so I won't go over too much, but this is where you can select weekday, Saturday, and Sunday as your service period. Then you can set a walk access distance and you can set the walk access from stops or segments. We'll just select all the defaults and hit OK. And what will happen is we'll load all of this in and it will show us a report of those routes that we have selected. So here are the routes and the total population is in the first column and that goes route to route and shows you the numbers, and the total is that non-double counted number. So this total represents just the walk access in total for all these routes. If they overlap each other, it doesn't double count them. So that total is also a non-double counted. So that's also good to know. And you have your percent minority. This is your population density per square mile. Also pretty handy to have to know the density numbers. You also have a jobs density per square mile here as well. So I mentioned that you can change the profiles on this report. You can do a population. So if you just want all of the population variables, you can have them right here. If you want household variables, it will filter to those. Employment is here. So this goes to job density, service, commercial, industrial, employment distributions. And again, it has the percentages here of the distribution of the total. So these are what's called shares. And so this is where we show the demographic counts, then it switches to the counts as opposed to the percentages. So you have the ability to show both in this environment. So if we switch that back off, then it goes back to percents. So I'll also show you the Title VI summary. So this is the Title VI variables that we have in TVES. So that includes your minority population, your low-income households, your LEP or limited English proficiency population. We also consider adults greater than 25 years old with no high school diploma as somewhat limited English proficiency. We also have Spanish-speaking, Chinese-speaking, French, Korean, Arabic, etc. Several other languages here as well. So if you're looking for distributions of your different languages that are primarily spoken on different routes, so if you're doing any kind of public involvement that might, you want to target particular languages on a route, then this is a good way to help you define that, especially for new routes. I mean, a lot of this you would maybe know for your existing routes, but this would be a good way to look, especially when the data updates with the upcoming census. did any of this information change? We haven't had that question yet about the new census, and I guess I'll just address it right here. Yes, we do plan to upgrade TBES to the new census. When it comes out, we will be ready to kind of reintroduce, and look at that data and see how that matches how we perform our data builds right now, and then update TBES to match that. So yes, there is plans to integrate the new census when it comes out, and we can take some time to analyze it. Okay, so one of the items for this that we also mentioned was the ability to click this map button for any of the routes or for the total of all the routes. So if we're looking for, let's say, Route 800, we can just click this button, and what happens is it will open up a market analysis for Route 800. So this is an express route, and so it took the stops that are around the 800 route. This is Butler Plaza. This is up towards Newberry area, and so it's just showing what's around that in terms of minority population in this case. So we can switch this to low-income households, and we're going to go through this in the market analysis section. But this is just a great way to quickly get a map of the distribution of population employment in the markets for this particular route. You can also do the full area for all routes by clicking on the totals line for the map button. So this will bring up all of the routes in total. So here's the quarter-mile walk access around all the routes that we had selected, and gives the total minority population of 25,544, which is 42.6% of the total population in this area, this market area. All right, so and we'll show you how to get this out in terms of an export in our next section. So I won't go through that process right now, but right now is just, hey, we can produce this very nice report with lots of detail at the route level for all kinds of analysis and interactive reporting for SE data relative to our routes. Okay, let's take a break. If there's any questions, we'll certainly take them right now. But otherwise, we'll take a break for 15, let's make it 10:25. Let's come back, and so we'll give a few extra minutes for it. And so we'll come back at 10:25, and if you have any questions in the interim, feel free to chat them. Otherwise, we'll talk then.